Your NFL Sundays are about to get a whole lot more magical. When you bundle NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get the most live NFL games all in one place. And with Multiview, you can watch up to 4 games at once, so you can catch all the action right from the comfort of home. Watch every game every Sunday on NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV. Sign up now at youtube.com/Sunday Ticket. Device and content restrictions apply. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games.
What we got to do is, we're in the middle of it now. I mean, we're in the freaking eye of the storm here.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Thursday night, August 1st, 2024. As we record this new episode, the MLB trade deadline, the dust has settled, and Chris Getz was able to find new homes, not just for Erick Fedde, Tommy Pham, and Michael Kopech in that 3-team trade, but also moving Tanner Banks and even Eloy Jimenez. Meaning we'll see the new guys more often, like reliever Frazier Ellard and the headliner from the 3-team trade, Miguel Vargas. We'll discuss Vargas' first impression with the White Sox, but the team keeps on losing. The streak is now 17 games as they head to Minneapolis to face the Minnesota Twins one last time in 2024. If the White Sox get swept again, they are 10-44 on the road this season, the losing streak would hit 20 games before making their way to Oakland. Remember, the all-time record is 23 straight losses. A big question now is if Pedro Grifol will last that long as White Sox manager. And that's where we'll start the show, as I'm joined by our Sox Machine beat reporter, James Fegan, and managing editor, Jim Margulis. And hello, fellas. We'll start the show with this audio clip from the show Foul Territory that features ex-White Sox AJ Pierzynski. This is ESPN 1000 AM Chicago's Jesse Rogers speculating about Grifol's job status.
To Monday as the manager of the White Sox?
I don't think so. There have been a lot of signs that they're going to make a change. I asked Chris Getz on deadline night, Tuesday night, hey, can you at least just say he's safe for the next couple months? I think the phrase he used was just to clear the deck of that news. And he certainly didn't give a ringing endorsement, which I guess makes sense. They were in the middle of a 15-game losing streak at that point, which is now 17 games.
Now, James, you were at that same press conference with Getz and wrote in a recent pregame notes on Sox Machine about the wonderful dodging attempt by Chris Getz in answering that question, speculating. But is it possible, James, that Getz is not being straightforward because the status of Grifol's employment is truly not in his hands?
I think that's fundamentally true, that even without saying it in a derogatory way, like this is a move that needs ownership sign off on. So yeah, he's not in a position to really make calls. And he's certainly not inclined to give endorsements, seeing as I think that's like a 4 straight media availability streak of avoiding it. But also from what we know about, what I've heard from the organization, is that if this was purely a front office move, this would have been made a while ago. And that the larger like momentum to just like, hey, let's get to the season and visit it is more of like a resolution at the end of an ownership and all the parties are consulted, not just like, the front office or, the 3 people that we think of in terms of like making the most decisions in baseball ops. So yeah, I don't think he's entirely in control, but the way he was kind of nervous and not willing to say like, even just like he's our manager right now and we support him, anything like that, or riding with him, and just the nervous nature in which he answered the question, I think fueled a lot of the speculation at the time. And I think the way Jesse and others have asked around, there hasn't really been the forceful response of like, no, it's through the end of the season. It's a lot more like, yeah, we'll see. And I think a lot of that obviously is, even maybe scratching out rough drafts of what I would write when Grifol goes, is that we can cite instances or, conversations I had with players where they were unhappy with him, or front office people who seemed exasperated with him. But, the reason why it's going to maybe probably reach the breaking point is that the results are bad. Like, for much as you want to say about Pedro Grifol's press conferences, about how they annoy you, or if you're an ardent Pedro Grifol defender, I think ultimately the reason it's going to get pointed to and why it's going to happen sooner than he wanted is that the results are just untenable. Like, anybody would get fired under these circumstances. It's probably one of the few organizations, if not the only one, that would ride out this sort of circumstance. This is probably the third, like, they got to fire somebody, right? Type of stretch of the season. We've had 3-22. We've had an earlier since obliterated team record losing streak, and now we have this. And really owning the attention of not just the organization, but of baseball a little bit now that we're post the trade deadline. But from an organizational standpoint, you've transitioned as much as you can towards no longer about building up veteran assets and trying to perform as well. It's really going to shift towards getting Brooks Baldwin, Miguel Vargas playing time, starts to produce Thorpe, Davis Martin, like a lot of like youth movement, developmental things, and guys who are going to be here past this season. And is this the atmosphere you want them into? And to get I'd asked that question, a version of it a few other times, but seemed like Chris Getz went along with it a bit more. But yeah, it's a concern. It's not a good environment to lose every day, and trying to focus on what our positives and what our developmentals are a bit more this time. So I think there's a ton of smoke. I can't find the source of the fire that will tell me when this will happen, but there's all the reason to think that there's not broad organizational support for continuing this on. Pedro Grifol referenced the third year of his contract the other day. I would have doubts about seeing that through. And this is also just a circumstance where any organization would be talking about this move. God knows the Yankees would have probably fans would not have sat through the 17-game losing streak with the patience of Job. So how far behind him are the White Sox?
James, you said the words ardent Pedro Grifol defender. Does that person exist?
Theoretically, when when he got hired and I called all the people he ever worked with and childhood friends, if I check with them now, I'm sure that's something I've considered. I think they would talk about he hasn't been handed the two greatest rosters in history. It's not something that necessarily prime Tony La Russa turns into 90 win teams. Maybe last year's, I don't know. And that this certainly isn't everything about this organization is tip top except for this. I'm sure there's plenty of things he could well-groundedly say, I haven't been put in a position to succeed. When I asked him when we had a one-on-one earlier this season, do you feel like you've been put in a position to succeed in this organization? He pretty much no commented it. So I think he's got real gripes in terms of what he's been handed and what he's been given to work with has not been the best. It's just that even people handing rebuilding rosters tend to get over 300 winning percentages, and we're a long way from that right now.
Yeah, I just pictured a situation where, whether it's Eduardo Perez, whether it's Mike Tozar, whether it's guys who were thoroughly behind the pick, just checking back with them and them thinking, yeah, it's not working out. I thought it was going to be okay. It's not. Cut the cord.
Yeah, I could see them saying it's not working out. I would be surprised if one of them said, turns out he's not a good manager. That's on me, guys. I don't think that would happen.
The thing that jumped out to me during this weekend session, it's a week session, was that Grifol sounded a little bit reflective, contemplative, which he never has. James would know better than I would, but in terms of everything that is reported, all the sound clips tend to be, we're focusing on this game. We're focusing on the problem this week or the opponent this week. We can't really talk about this, whether it's, major concerns about a player slumping, whether it's Tim Anderson getting punched out, whether it's Keenan Middleton's comments, just no matter what kind of situation arose that demanded comment and going off script a little bit, he could not be knocked off script and people would do the talking for him. He would not do the talking. But what jumped out to me was that he actually said something specific that he said he wished he could do different. Because one thing that frustrated me about Grifol was when he talked about the end of last year saying, what can you do better? It's like, well, I have a list of things. What are they? That's between me and the players. Like, well, that doesn't really help us keep him accountable. That doesn't help set expectations going to next year. And if he said something like, I gave players too much rope, or I need to be more flexible with my thinking when things aren't going well, didn't say that. And sure enough, the same problems happen again, and he sticks with the same players over and over again. So clearly he didn't think that was a problem. So that was a case of just, me not thinking he's the best at self-assessment. So with that being the case, I was surprised when he actually said, the Kyle Bradish comments that I made about the team being effing flat when they almost got no hit by him, that probably wasn't smart. I probably shouldn't have done that. And that's just one small thing, a drop in the bucket for everything that hasn't gone well in his tenure and a lot of things he's responsible for. But that jumped out to me in terms of maybe he is considering just the writing on the wall a little bit and seeing it and can't avoid it, and just knowing that anytime it could happen.
It certainly was unique to me, and it stuck out, especially since he would famously doubled down and said, I'm doubling down at the time. But in hindsight, it also was a little bit of, I'm being accused of blaming the players. And before I defend how I would never do that, let me acknowledge the one time I did do that. And that was out of character, and I wouldn't do that again.
Yeah.
So it did have a little specific tactic for the present storm he's dealing with. But yes, it did strike me in the same way that it struck you.
So, Jim, if this decision is out of Chris Getz's hands until Jerry Reinsdorf calls or emails him and tells Getz, okay, you can go ahead and fire Pedro, how much more embarrassment can Jerry Reinsdorf handle?
Plenty. I don't think it registers. I think he just has, objectives to hit, whether it's amount left on his contract, or money he wants to spend, or dollars he doesn't want to spend when it comes to individual values. And nothing changes, or very few things change his mind when it comes to changing the course. The way he presents things is always a sensible way. And when things go wrong, it's the problem of the players or the system or something that's getting in his way. So I think his threshold for embarrassment is very, very high, because he's just isolated from things. But one thing that jumped out to me, or I thought of, is, are they trying to is it a case where they want to have Grifol not end his White Sox career on a 14-game losing streak, 15, 16, 17? They're just trying to wait for him to have one win or one normal series to not necessarily go on a high note, but also just not leave like that. I think, if you're trying to be sympathetic and say Reinsdorf has a soul, you could say you just want him to have something to go out on, and, have a little bit of pride going out, versus he got fired during the losing streak that would not end. It went on to 21 games and Reinsdorf finally said enough. That would be the sympathetic read. However, when you go back to Robin Ventura and the way Reinsdorf let that dangle all month, and finally Ventura had to fire himself effectively by saying, I don't want to come back. I'm done with this. And, Reinsdorf leaked through Nightingale that, Ventura, you'd love to have him back. It's up to him. And the kind of the coward's way of doing it. There is that element where he just prefers, he will not take a stand. He will not make a hard call, a difficult decision, whether it's emotionally difficult, whether it's financially difficult. He just refuses to, passes it off, and it gets messy, and he takes no accountability of it. And it's up to Grifol to say, I'm done, or it's up to, the year to end, and then everybody can do it quietly when there's no press conference to be had. So can see it either way, but that's just one thing that's jumped out to me, is if they're waiting for a win, maybe they've been wanting to do it for a week and a half, and it just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, because on the business side, White Sox attendance, they have yet to draw 1 million fans. It is now August 1st. The White Sox have yet to draw 1 million fans this season after 57 home games. They're averaging a little more than 16,400 per game. That's not through the gate. That's just tickets sold. As a season ticket holder, I can tell you, being at most of these home games, there's not 16,000 people on average at these games. But as far as ticket capacity, that's only a little more than 40% of the stadium that the White Sox on average are selling tickets for. That is a glaring number, especially with attendance growing for most of Major League Baseball. And with professional sports being an entertainment business, I know that Jerry Reinsdorf has said through the grapevine that he doesn't care about money. He cares about winning. But as you pointed out, Jim, like his decisions throughout his entire tenure as White Sox chairman say differently. And the business is taking such a big blow that it will likely impact the player payroll budget for next season. So don't get too hopeful with your offseason plan projects, folks, which means bouncing back from this travesty of a season will be difficult to believe, other than, no, seriously, it can't get any worse than 2024. Maybe letting Charlie Montoyo creates a spark if he takes over. My point of view, what do you have to lose at this point? Because Grifol, Jim, has now set the worst winning percentage mark as White Sox manager in franchise history. I guess there's still the all-time mark, but the White Sox are going to have to go on like a 40-game losing streak to get that low, which I guess I shouldn't test them by saying that publicly after they went 3-22 in the month of July. I think that's what would move the needle for Jerry, is if they get swept by the Twins and this losing streak is now 20 games in a row, he may do something. That might be embarrassing enough for Jerry to feel a little ashamed of what has happened and asking Chris Getz, what do we need to do to get ourselves a win?
There was that. Oh, sorry.
Just the 500 level, the upper deck concessions were closed like the entire Royal Series, which is someone who was trying to make a very poor food decision after like a lot of scrambling on the day of the Fedde trade, and walking up there and like just looking at my phone and then realizing I was alone in an empty concourse with a single security guard staring at me, wondering what I was doing.
Get up here?
And trying to do the Abe Simpson routine back out of there. It struck me as not a good sign.
The line that I always go back to is the one in the Scar Aficionado article from 1995 that said, throughout the fall and winter, he is still driven by the dream to create a World Series winner in a business climate that made sense to him, which is, I think that Cigar Aficionado ease for cheap, or like, penny wise and dollar stupid or something like that. But it's with Grifol, like that's what I think it comes down to, is like, why should I pay two managers? It doesn't make sense to pay two managers, or it doesn't make sense to hire a new manager or do some interim thing. Like, I don't know if Montoyo has an escalator clause in his contract that if he has to take over the managerial job, like he gets, X amount of dollars more than he's currently getting paid. But just, why do I need to pay more people money when the season's lost? Like, that doesn't make sense. Why don't we just, get through the rest of the season? I think he does really try to hold his nose or pretend it's not happening until it's finally is staring in the face. So yeah, maybe a losing streak that starts with 2 will be enough to make that kind of dent.
Because after this road trip, which it starts in Minneapolis, and we'll preview that series in a moment, then it goes to Oakland, which the White Sox notoriously have had a difficult time in Oakland. It'll be the last time the White Sox play at the Oakland Coliseum before the Athletics move to Sacramento next season. But then they come home and they have 2 games against the Chicago Cubs. If they get swept on this road trip, which is totally plausible, then the White Sox are going for the all-time record against their rival in the city, the Chicago Cubs, a team that Jerry Reinsdorf does care about on how the White Sox are doing against the Cubs. And if the Cubs were to win that Friday night game, Jim, and the White Sox set the worst losing streak of all time at 24 games, I don't know what Jerry's going to do. I really don't, because it would be the Cubs that would be clinching that over the White Sox, and that would hang over White Sox fans' heads forever. Hey, remember that time the Cubs beat the White Sox and you guys set the worst losing streak ever in Major League Baseball? How awesome that was. And that was also at your home stadium.
Yeah, I mean, like to quote Tommy Lee Jones, I don't care when it comes to how Jerry feels. Like, I honestly don't.
He just needs to do something. Like
Yeah.
if the entire organization is waiting on this guy, that's why I asked, like, how much more embarrassment can Jerry Reinsdorf handle? It got to a breaking point last year. He has said enough was enough, and then before the game, caught Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams by surprise and fired him. Caught everyone by surprise by making that decision.
Never again, he said.
Sure. James, does the media pool ever get a heads up if Chris Getz is attending a road series?
No, not really, unless like there's some plan for availability during it. It's more just something you pick up from seeing them walk through the clubhouse. It's if you're really curious, you can ask. But it's not something to alert us. Certainly not to create false expectations like Josh Barfield's here and he can't wait to talk to you, because that's not really the vibe. Normally they tell us about people who might talk to us as opposed to people whose plan A would involve not talking to us.
I ask because if we knew for certain that Chris Getz was traveling with the team to Minneapolis, then my following question may have more weight to it, more gravity to it. After this series, gentlemen, is Pedro Grifol still the manager of the White Sox? Jim, I'll start with you.
I'll say yes.
James, you got to guess.
I have to guess. I'll say yes, but like purely like because if I thought they were going to do it, we all thought they were going to do it like yesterday or today. Like doing it in the middle of a road trip. Yes, every day, every game is like a new level of like, oh my God, how can this keep going? An emergency. So that like the breaking point isn't necessarily predictable, but I feel like the more logical breaking points would be between like trips and travel and plan, like, making Ed Casson do travel arrangements for 6 days of Pedro and only doing 3. Like, you could have made his life easier if no one else's. Like that's sort of like consideration.
Yeah, everybody who's heading to Oakland, take one step forward. Not so fast, Pedro.
Yeah, like even in Oakland, just like, hey, we're going back to Chicago. What if you did it? Like even that would be like a more natural break than we're going to Oakland, you stay in Minnesota type of thing.
Stay on the tarmac.
Like, well, I'm not doing either of those.
There's a lot that could impress you about the all-new Honda Prologue EV. True, it's got class-leading passenger space and clean, thoughtful design and intuitive technology. But what really sets the Prologue apart from the competition is that it's more than an EV. It's a Honda. Honda, the power of dreams. Visit honda.com/prologue to learn more.
Summer is supposed to be an opportunity to slow down, but when you look at your kids, you can't help but notice that your kids are growing up fast. Help them build independence as they grow with Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app for families, where parents can keep an eye on kids' money habits while kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely. It's the easy, convenient way to raise financially smart kids. Get your first month free when you sign up at greenlight.com/Spotify.
Yeah, again, after the Oakland series, the White Sox come home to face the Cubs. They do have that Sunday off, which is odd. It's the first Sunday off in a very long time for the Chicago White Sox. And then they'll play the New York Yankees. We got that to look forward to. That's the upcoming homestand for the White Sox. We'll see if Grifol is still with the White Sox. Now back to on the field, other than Pedro Grifol's job status, which we'll be paying attention to all weekend in Minneapolis and going into next week into Oakland. Miguel Vargas, great head of hair. Great head of hair, James. Is that 80 grade hair?
80 sets the scale, as in this is the best hair in the entire league.
Yeah, was that
I'm comfortable giving it.
Did Beckham have the best head of hair that you ever interviewed?
I would lean Vargas because I'm preferential to curls over swoops. Perhaps that's my
volume
personal
and bounce.
Bias. Going at like I need to see a larger scope of the league before I slap an 80 grade on somebody. Like if we want to go 70, sure, I'm there. Like let's call it elite right now.
All right.
But to truly say like Yeah, I don't need to see the West Coast. This is my Feels a little bit like a Midwest scout who's been, watching Big Ten baseball for too long.
Vargas, his first 2 games for the White Sox, not great. He went 0 for 8 with 3 strikeouts in those games. And again, the thing we're going to be focusing on with Vargas, at least I am, is how is Vargas faring when it is a righty on the mound against the fastball? And thanks to Baseball Savant, they give you a pitch breakdown on how the batter does against opposing pitchers based on the pitch type. In the 2 games, Vargas faced 9 four-seamers against righties. He only had to have 4 swings. He whiffed twice, and he had 2 foul balls. So he did not put a ball in play against a 4-seamer. Opposing pitchers for the Royals had a tough time locating the 4-seamers against Vargas. He did take 5 balls. So I think it's clear he's got good plate discipline. I think he understands what the strike zone is. He's been caught off sometimes. He had 1 strikeout that was looking against the Royals. But when he did put the ball in play, Vargas only had 1 batted ball that exceeded 80 mile per hour exit velocity. And that was at 93.9 miles per hour. We'll call it 94 miles per hour. That's still not considered a hard hit. So out of all the balls in play that Vargas put against the Royals in those 2 games, none were considered hard hit. And defensively, he played left field in the second game, and he badly misplayed a fly ball. So we got to see what's been the struggles for Vargas in the major league level when he was with the Dodgers, inability to hit the fastball and his defensive liability, especially in the outfield. James, what was your first impression of Miguel Vargas?
He certainly didn't look like on time or anything. He was in a kind of a bad slump the latter half of July before the Dodgers traded him, and certainly wasn't playing every day anymore. I think it had been 4 days since his last start and his first start with the White Sox. He generally looked in between, like the one strikeout looking. He kind of got like a backdoor breaking ball or a ball that went ball to strike on him, like a curveball. I think it was high in the zone and dropped in. It's certainly not the thing you necessarily expect a guy who's kind of cold off the bench to track successfully. Is a pretty good pitch. I share the same concerns about the 4-seam right on right, and certainly with Bailey over. Simeon Wood Richardson throws a 4-seam. I don't know why I'm blanking on the third choice.
Joe Ryan.
Joe Ryan. It will definitely be a test of whether you can hit right on right 4-seamers given the approach angle he brings on that. But in a vacuum, not in a vacuum, but just it's 2 games. He looked bad. I don't necessarily, as much as the data kind of backs up the watch for. I don't know if I would go off of 2 games of him looking kind of off for it. The defensive misplay was not good. It reminded me a little bit of what he looked like in left field with the Dodgers, where it was clearly some athleticism and speed here, but not necessarily pointing in the right direction very consistently. It stands to reason he came up more as an infielder, and the outfield's been a late thing, and it just hasn't been something that's been super intuitive of him for route running. Given the athleticism present and the speed present, you would think that he probably has a higher ceiling doing that repeatedly with time than, say, Gavin Sheets does. But the White Sox haven't and especially given that he's probably certainly the most valuable piece, certainly because the most advanced piece, and certainly with what the state of their lineup is, where it's not like there's a bunch of cornerstones at every position. I was expecting them to be a bit more he's bounced around, but he's going to play X with us. He's going to be a second baseman, hell or high water type of thing, or he's going to be left field, hell or high water. Even that would just be I would think that he's not in a position where he has to bounce around to find a land spot, especially when they're committed to the idea that he is going to hit every day. For him to be doing kind of the Danny Mendick, Lenny Sosa routine of, he kind of finds the spot in the lineup that's a soft room for him. I don't think left field's going to be open to him every day, as long as Pedro Grifol is employed, where you have Andrew Benintendi, and that's kind of his preferred position to play as well. They're very committed to the idea he hasn't gotten runway in the major leagues. We haven't really seen what his hit tool can do over a sustained period of time, getting everyday at bats. But to not have that backed up by where he'll play, especially with what you're kind of choosing between, why can't you just give him right field right now? There's no one really making demands on it. You're pushing aside Gavin Sheets, who's really had a rough month, and really, if you were really wanted to get him in and slide in some other places, can first base, DH, you just trade away your kind of anchor DH to that spot. So now you can move and cycle Vaughn and Sheets in there if you really have a notion to. If Vargas is this important and has this kind of upside that you're excited about, it seems like maybe you could benefit from it. And certainly has the physical aptitude where he would just do well just putting him in a spot. But second base seems kind of leaning towards Brooks Baldwin, which sure, it's a plan. I'd give him a spot to play every day, and that's great. I think there should be one for Vargas as well.
Good points by James. And to touch on Sheets real quick, last 30 games, Gavin Sheets has a 472 OPS. He has not hit a home run in his last 30 games with the White Sox.
Jim, it's that high.
Yeah, right.
I thought low 400s, but off the top of my head.
Well, I thought James made a lot of great points there, especially dedicating right field to Vargas. Do you feel the same, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, like what struck me watching him for a couple games and then seeing, like, I think it was near mentions about Vargas's left field play, and Dodgers fans near mentions like, yeah, we saw him play left field. This is terrible. You're seeing what we saw, and why the Dodgers traded him. It's like, it struck me that the White Sox traded for the Dodgers White Sox player. Like, he doesn't have a position. He doesn't hit right-handed fastballs. And you don't know if he's going to do anything well enough to keep getting chances to hit. Like, that's kind of what's jumping out to me in terms of like watching him is does he, if he were not Miguel Vargas, if he were like, Danny Mendick, so somebody who's been around and had a couple chances and is not owed chances, is there anything he'd be doing right now to deserve chances? That's kind of how I'm looking at it. Just because the White Sox need players who are immediately useful in one facet or another. They don't have to be great right away or even good right away. They just need to help some way to make whoever's managing the White Sox lineup easier by at least saying, well, he's not hitting, but he plays a good right field, or he's calling a good game, or he's pitching 5 innings, et cetera. He's not walking guys. He's efficient with his pitches. Like, they just need like a strength. And Vargas, like through 2 games, not seeing a strength. And I think that's what concerns me, and especially concerns me since reading through various reactions like Jason Stark and Ken Rosenthal and such as the deadline smoke clears, and now they're just going through classic winners and losers type thing, is that the White Sox traded 3 players in the deal and they got 3 players back. So it's like you're kind of trading, basically if you look at it in terms of trading Fedde for Vargas and trading, Pham and Kopech for Perez or Albertus, or, however you want to arrange it. Like, that's kind of how the deal shakes out. Cause obviously you wouldn't trade like Kopech for nothing and Fedde for 2 players. Then, like, if it is Fedde for Vargas, and Vargas, is immediately starting out looking like he's been on the White Sox all along, that does not really bode well for Getz's first deadline and one of his major moves that he didn't necessarily have to nail, because Fedde's, he has a year and a half in his contract, and teams might value him differently, but he had at least show that like his heart was in the right place, or like, he was identifying value the best that anybody could at the time. And if it works out, it works out. And it seems like in real time, people are saying like, that's it. Not necessarily in terms of like Vargas being somebody you can write off because he does have potential, but just, he does have flaws that put the White Sox in this dead end in the first place. And he seems like the guy who will help you keep digging the hole deeper, based on his skill set versus, showing the White Sox a different way to do it.
According to the Spot Track, Vargas does not hit arbitration right now. He's on pace until 2027. Is that correct?
I think he's got 2 pre-arb years.
2 pre-arb years. Okay. After this season.
The people I spoke to who were like, will they sniff contention before he hits arbitration? We're fully aware and saying I don't see the White Sox sniffing contention in the next 2 seasons.
Got it. Because it'd be something, because he's appeared in 2022, 2023, and now 2024. So it'd be one thing if, oh yeah, he's hitting arbitration next year. Whoops. The thing about Vargas, again, it's just 2 games. Let's see how he does on this road trip to Minneapolis and Oakland. As James pointed out, Vargas is going to face 3 straight right-handed pitchers. And I do think that Vargas needs to be in the lineup every single day, because it does raise an interesting philosophical debate when it comes to player development, especially hitters in the majors. Is it just worthwhile to give as many reps as possible, no matter how much a player struggles against a particular pitch? It harkens back to all the conversations we've had the last couple of years, Jim, and my gripes about Andrew Vaughn's inability to hit breaking stuff from right-handed pitchers. And it's not getting better. Even into his fourth season, I think I'm just sold on the fact that Andrew Vaughn's always going to have a tough time hitting for power, hitting for much contact against sliders from right-handed pitchers. But Vaughn demolishes fastballs. So that's just what he's going to have to do. He needs to be ultra aggressive when he sees fastballs early in the count. That's going to hurt his walk rate. That's going to end up hurting his on-base percentage if he doesn't hit at a high batting average. That's just who Andrew Vaughn is going to be. I have settled that Andrew Vaughn is going to be a 725 OPS hitting first baseman, and that clearly is not good enough if the White Sox ever want to contend or have a first baseman that is considered top class like they've had in recent history with Frank Thomas, Paul Konerko, and Jose Abreu. But with Vargas, with the fastball, I like the idea of having him play every day, and this is where I'm going to be curious. Can a hitter eventually figure out how to hit major league velocity? Because his numbers suggest that he demolishes AAA velocity. And as you recently wrote about Colson Montgomery and his struggles in the facing AAA, if it's just a matter of time, well, then hopefully Vargas does figure it out and makes his trade look better. But as you pointed out, Jim, it is the White Sox, the cue for struggling hitters that never find their groove, never find their rhythm, or ever figure it out and how to conquer their weaknesses. Is that line is getting longer by the game.
Yeah, and that's the case too with the managerial decisions, putting lineups together. Is that also it grows longer by the game, but also efforts aren't made to mitigate some weaknesses, and like whether it's Eloy's ground ball problem, whether it's Benintendi's just lack of authoritative contact, just having on top of the lineup every day. Tim Anderson last year, those are three data points of just putting them out there every day, no matter what, regardless of opponent, is not good for development or not good for just a sense of accountability. So that's, I think, what the whoever's managing the White Sox a week from now and then like throughout the rest of the season is, maybe nobody's going to be paying attention this year aside from whether they hit the loss record or not. But I do think there is at some point, probably next year, it becomes a case of guys can't struggle forever. Like, I think that needs to be like top of the list for if Chris Getz is allowed to interview people. Like, I'm not sure if this is a case of like Jerry Reinsdorf outsourcing it to Tony La Russa and being like, you pick somebody and we'll make it happen. But if I were Chris Getz and had the ability to make the call, I think my first thing was, you have a hitter who's under contract through 2026, and it's May 17th, and you list all the numbers going wrong. How do you adjust this? Or like, what do you say? What's your messaging like? And just and go from there, because that's something the White Sox did not seem to think about, or Grifol's never thought. Like, even now, like they traded to Eloy before like the White Sox could bench Eloy. Like, just Eloy had an entire career without ever being relegated to a lesser role. And that's, I think, what has to change. So I think that's, Vargas should be allowed to struggle. But if it is just doing the same thing over and over again, at some point the White Sox have to stop doing that.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Think you know the Brooks Ghost? Think again. Introducing the all-new, better-than-ever Ghost 16. Now with nitrogen-infused cushioning for lightweight, supreme softness that feels good every step, every street, every single day. So go ahead, take your daily joyride in the all-new nitrogen-infused Ghost 16. It'll turn your everyday miles into everyday endorphins. Let's run there. Head to brooksrunning.com to learn more.
Well, let's pivot to the White Sox next series. Again, facing the Minnesota Twins this weekend. The Twins, just like every team playing the White Sox that's in postseason contention, they need this series. They're currently 59-48. They're third place in the American League Central. They dropped half game behind the Kansas City Royals when the Royals swept the White Sox. The Twins are 6.5 games back of the Cleveland Guardians for first place in the American League Central. If the season ended today, the Minnesota Twins would be the 6th seed in the American League postseason picture. Against the White Sox, the Twins are 9-1. I don't remember when the White Sox beat the Twins, but they did.
I do.
What game was that?
It was the Immaculate Inning. It was their last victory.
Oh, it was their last win. That's right.
That's right. I feel like I had so enjoyed this bit of trivia. I thought you were cueing me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for reminding me, James.
It almost feels like with Kopech's immaculate inning, it was like, and he strikes out the side on 9 pitches, an immaculate inning, roll credits. And it's like Naked Gun or something like that, where they just got in freeze frame while the credits roll, but they're clearly like still supposed to be rolling. And they're just like pouring I think there's one Police Squad episode where he's pouring the coffee and the coffee just streaming down his arm. But they're still frozen in place, smiling and pretending to laugh. Like that's kind of what the White Sox are doing right now. Just creating a mess and pretending like the immaculate inning is where it all ended.
I like your idea. What I thought of is that like Kopech's warming up and somebody in the Sox dugout was like, what I wouldn't give for him to just come out and pump strikes one time and like all the monkeys like fingers like curl at once and they kind of wonder what they did as he throws the immaculate inning. And then we find out.
That's the price to pay for the first time. Not the first time, but first time in a long time, over 100 years, an immaculate inning for the White Sox with Michael Kopech. They lose 17 straight games. So let's see if they can break the losing streak. Your pitching problems for this series, Friday night, 7:10 p.m. Central Time. The Dart returns as a starter. Davis Martin will make the start, opposing Joe Ryan. Saturday at 6:10 p.m. Central Time, Garrett Crochet will take the ball against Bailey Ober, which Ober's been pitching really well as of late for the Twins. And then Sunday, the 15-game losing streak is on the line with Chris Flexen making the start for the White Sox. This is at 1:10 p.m. Central Time against Simeon Woods Richardson. And to Davis Martin and Garrett Crochet, it's been a while, Jim, since we talked about Davis Martin on this podcast in detail. I look forward to how the Dart pitches on Friday night. He looked good coming out of the bullpen for the White Sox, but before injury, I always felt like he could be a back of the rotation type of starter. A development win for the White Sox since Davis Martin was throwing 90, 91 at Texas Tech. It just surprised us a couple years ago with a velocity jump. But James, is there any signs or any clues on what type of work restrictions that both Davis Martin and Garrett Crochet will have in this series?
I mean, I think Jim has more up-to-date information. Like, wasn't Martin up, like he was cleared for 75 his last Charlotte outing?
Yeah, he was limited to 4 and 60 because of a rain delay, but he was cleared for like 5 and 75-80.
So the logical move would that he'd be either around that age or maybe bump up to 90 in his first start back. Garrett Crochet is more explicitly around the 75 pitch mark. We've seen starts where that could be 5 innings. It seems like more recently it's been around 4 because he's kind of labored a bit more. Garrett himself has said that he wishes he didn't know because he feels like when he knows he has limited pitches, he kind of tries to maybe look for quick contact or challenge with a fastball a bit more than he'd be inclined to when he's just like, I'm going out here, I'm going batter, I'm just trying to blow everybody away. So it's if both team went 5, you'd probably consider it a successful day at the office. That's not great because it's probably the starting pitching arrangements that I feel at least most excited about watching or most optimistic. Flexen's become oddly dependable while not really creating much hope that his ERA will ever dip below like 480. He's never going to go 7 innings. He's probably never going to like hold you scoreless. There'll probably be a solo shot mixed in there, and there'll be the random, like not random, but occasional monthly blow up outing where he just gets hit really hard and it spikes everything. But you watch him like day in, day out, you think like, yeah, this guy does give you a chance pretty regularly. Something about him is just not easy for guys to square up. You see some bad swings in the cutter. You see a lot of people staring at the big looping curveball that seems like it should not work very often. You see people swing through 90 miles an hour. It's weird. It's what I hope Drew Thorpe looks like throwing 90 miles an hour one day. You're not still in a position where Garrett Crochet can just throw 8 scoreless innings and win the game for you. And you can't really have Erick Fedde do that either. So as much as I think like you go through the turns, like Flexen's probably the starting pitching option I'm least intrigued to see. He's not the one I feel worse with the way Drew Thorpe's looked the last couple outings. But they should have chances based on what they have from the starting pitching. It's just they don't have like we'll win the game for you and all you have to do is score 2 runs on accident, which is probably accounted for a third of their wins this season, and seems like the most reliable way to get themselves out of this.
Yeah, it could be a lot of bullpen for the White Sox this weekend, Jim. I wanted to ask you, Jim, about what was said on Foul Territory. Old friend Dan Hayes, when he was sharing his insight about, because the Minnesota Twins were not that active at the trade deadline, and they were trying to add a starting pitcher, and that starting pitcher was Erick Fedde, and Dan was just sharing some insight that he heard about the Twins and White Sox talking about Erick Fedde, and the White Sox initial ask was at least one top 50 prospect in Major League Baseball. And that was way too much for the Twins, and they really never connected. And of course, we all know how that ended up with Fedde going to St. Louis. But we talked about this, and Bob Nightingale wrote about it in his Sunday column recently before the trade deadline, is that the White Sox were unwilling to trade anyone within the division except for Paul DeJong to Kansas City. Is this the part where it's like a bit weird? Like, why would the White Sox be hung up and try and trade Erick Fedde? Paul DeJong, that's an exception. They don't care. But Erick Fedde,
on shipping.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they did. He just
That's
walked across
pickup.
the diamond.
Yeah.
But is this where it could be a bit short-sighted?
Yeah, I can see, I wrote about it in Sox Machine, and some people said, well, it could be like a leverage thing. Like it could be that, they want to try to get the Twins to up their offer, kind of hold out that, they can drive a harder bargain, and didn't seem to be the case. Like it seemed to be that the White Sox had one list, the Twins had another list of players. They didn't come close to bridging the gap, and the Twins, according to Dan, said that, both the White Sox and Tigers just didn't sound all that interested in, like, maybe it was a division thing or not, but just were not interested in closing the gap at all. I just thought that you drop that line, I think, or reasoning for, like, say, Luis Robert. If you have Luis Robert with 3+ years of, team control left, and what he's like at the height of his powers, and you trade him to Minnesota, say, and then all of a sudden, like, you see him for 13 times a season. He's in the same outfield, as other superlative defenders, and they're covering all sorts of ground and just like making your life hell, and just being like, you traded a guy you didn't have to. Why'd you do that? So whereas like Fedde, only a year and a half, like trading in the division is something that used to be avoided. And then teams started to say like, especially with the postseason expanding and having multiple ways to get in the postseason without just beating one team ahead of you, became less important and just about getting the better deal. And so you've seen that break. So to have Chris Getz come in and then bring out a line, or have the White Sox bring out a line that's pretty old and musty at this point, does not inspire faith. And I think when the situation is this bad, I don't think you want to have, beggars can't be choosers, and you can't be saying, we'd rather close off the amount of teams we're willing to deal with versus get the best possible return under any circumstance. And so that's why I didn't understand why that was worth trotting out if the White Sox didn't believe it. So that's why, if that's the case, then did the White Sox believe it, or believe it a little bit? And that's what I'm not a fan of.
Well, we'll see on how the White Sox and Twins fare over the weekend. Again, the White Sox are awful on the road this year. 10-44. They, on average, allow almost 5.5 runs per road game, and they are scoring 3 runs per road game. So the games have not been particularly close for the White Sox on the road. There's been some blowouts, so we'll see if the White Sox can keep it close and snap the 17-game losing streak. If they do not and they get swept, this is our show poll, and this is how we're going to end the podcast here. I asked on Twitter, which you can follow us on Twitter. We're at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan, and you can follow me at Sox Machine_Josh. This show poll was over under 21.5 game losing streak for the White Sox. So, Jim, I'll start with you. Are you taking the over 21.5 games, which then would leak into Oakland, or are you taking the under?
I'm going to say over, because entering the season, when we were giving our predictions for record, I said they're going to go 54 and 108. And I thought that was pretty bad. Like, I thought that was, I was setting the bar thinking, it feels like everything could go wrong this year. What's a record that reflects that in a prediction? Because it's hard to lose 108 games in the season and see it coming in most cases. And now that looks quaint and sweet and, bless your heart in terms of optimism. So I'm inclined, given everything they've shown since, to just imagine it could get worse and keep getting worse. So I'll say the over.
All right. James, how about you? You taking the over? You taking the under?
I'm just focused on the fact that they'd have to start playing above 500 ball to lose 108 games from here on out. So that's not great. I wanted to be bullish in spring training. I wanted to be bullish last year because I had given them their offseason an F, but I wanted to defend the fact that I still thought like the core was, could win the AL Central worthy, which I didn't think was heavy praise, but still something. But every time I've tried to like give them the benefit of the doubt in some level or be optimistic, it's been the wrongest I've been as a professional. So I've been broken. I feel like they were playing their worst baseball of the year. That was a hot take just off the Pittsburgh series alone. Probably less of one now. It's probably a bit more on the reins of like anonymous source says Pedro's not the right man for a job. Like, wow, how'd you get them to say that?
Was that an anonymous source? My mom.
So I'll go over with, I think, the Guardians have obviously played well, credit to them, but I still look at the Twins lineup and rotation and think like this looks like the best team in the division. And so I don't think this is a good matchup for them. They haven't played well on the road. They probably can get half as many innings from Garrett Crochet this week as they want. They have a bit fewer credible hitters who can, both Over and Ryan are over, a home run per 9 innings. It'd be nice if you had a Paul DeYoung type of guy who could maybe pop one in a critical moment to take advantage of that, or Tommy Pham. Both those guys are gone. It'd be a great series for Miguel Vargas to get hot, but I'm not staking any more career credibility calls on the 2024 White Sox doing well. I will go over.
Well, there are so many bullpen innings to cover and a pretty bad defense.
Possibly the worst.
Yeah.
Possible.
There was like a game where like on its face, Frazier Ellard trying to protect a 1-run lead in his major league debut.
Yeah.
Was a decision that I thought like, don't love it.
Yeah.
And looking as nervous as somebody can look.
You always assume that there's people not available, and Pedro had said like, the trade deadline and with the blown save they had the other night where they'd used Wilson and Brevia, that the only person who was available for that game who didn't pitch was Tuki Desant. And so it's like when I'm getting to the point like, should have been Frazier Ellard in that big moment or Jared Schuster or Tuki Desant, I'm just like, well, this isn't worth having like a super long discussion about. He just picked one, left-handed, whatever. Like, and I think there's going to be a lot of situations, given that they traded, 2 of their best relievers, where it's going to be like, there's no perfect decisions for this matchup. Pick a guy and say, go get him as he goes and faces Byron Buxton with the lead run on second. Like, there's going to be too many moments like that for me to really be bullish on like they'll navigate through. They don't have enough innings. As optimistic as I want to be on Martin and Crochet, I don't think they have enough innings in them to control a game, or even 2/3 of a game necessarily.
It's looking good for my steak dinner bet. This weekend can help.
The world burns and Josh enjoys steak.
And I enjoy steak. Our show poll, 53% picked over 21.5. 47% believe the White Sox will win a game in the next 4. We'll see if they do win a game in Minneapolis against the Twins. That will be a pretty big shock, a pretty big upset, but then they will head to Oakland, and the A's have been hitting better as of late. They've been playing a lot better baseball than the White Sox as of late. So we'll see if it does hit the over at 21.5 games. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching as well on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. Very busy week for us. And I just want to say thank you to everyone. July is our busiest month. You got the MLB draft, you got the All-Star break, you got the trade deadline, and we hustled over at Sox Machine. So for all those that read and followed us on social media and listened and watched the shows, greatly appreciate every one of you. If you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show, of course, wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. And again, follow us on social media. We are at Sox Machine. You can help support Sox Machine and gain full access to our coverage of the Chicago White Sox, including all the coverage from James Fegan and Jim's excellent recent piece about Colson Montgomery by signing up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Our Patreon supporters not only get the full access to our coverage, but they also get ad-free versions of both the podcast and the website. And we also have additional tiers of support that come with additional benefits, as well as an opportunity to join our Veterans Committee, which you can be part of the group chat. So if we hear early rumors or whispers or gossip, that's where we gossip with everyone. That's part of the Sox Machine Patreon VC. So they get a chance to have direct access to us and text along the chaotic but historical 2024 White Sox season. So if that's something of interest to you, you can sign up again at patreon.com/Sox Machine. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all the things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside James Fegan and Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.